When I think of goal setting, the quote that comes to mind is by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, the author of my favorite book, The Little Prince. A goal without a plan is just a wish. Goal setting is more than just wanting to increase a RIT score. While this is one measurement of growth, there needs to be a plan and incremental steps to achieve the goal. In my experience as a teacher, building administrator, and curriculum director, I have seen how goal setting done correctly leads to student ownership and investment in learning. When our students knew where they needed to go and how they could get there, we saw not only growth in RIT points, but growth in classwork and self-esteem. When thinking about goal setting with map growth data, there are a couple vital considerations. First and foremost, goals must be set with the learner. If goals are created and given to a learner, the investment in the goal belongs to the giver, not the receiver. Secondly, the goal must center on the relevant learning that needs to occur, not just an increase in a number. The student profile report is a good starting point to have a discussion with your learner about where they are and where they want to be. Start with talking with the student about how they felt when they took the assessment. What did they feel comfortable with? What was challenging? Then you can look at the instructional areas and see which instructional areas fit with what they identified. For example, the student might express that they felt pretty good about questions related to whole numbers and basic operations. They were not as sure about the questions about fractions. Next, you can look at the goal section of the report along with the learner. How many RIP points of growth would be average for similar learners? Depending on the learner's current achievement percentile, meeting the average growth might be adequate. If they are at the 85th percentile, meeting the growth projection would keep them at roughly that achievement level. If a learner's current achievement percentile is below the 50th percentile, above average growth might be needed to increase their achievement percentile. A reasonable growth percentile would be at about the 60th percentile of growth. This gives a goal for the next MAP growth assessment, but now we need the plan and incremental steps to reach this goal. Just having a number in mind doesn't tell us how to get there. If I want to run a 5K, I can't just sign up for the race. I have to make a plan to train and track the progress frequently. I can make adjustments along the way and celebrate those small progress. After discussion about a reasonable goal, the next step is to go back to the instructional areas section of the report and determine specifically what learning would contribute to the goal of the increased RIT score. Go back to the conversation about what the learner felt confident with and what they feel they could use support with. Also keep in mind what units you may be teaching between now and the next MAP growth assessment. A student may have an area of focus that is not something you'll be working on yet. If their suggested area of focus is measurement and data, and that does not show up in your scope and sequence in the next few months, it might not be an effective area of focus for math. During the discussion with the student, you can point out that while this is a possible area of focus, we'll come back to that when it's more appropriate for our instruction. We can also discuss that graphs, tables, measuring are all concepts that may come up in social studies or science classes. That would be a great time to begin focus on this area. When you've determined an area for focus, expand this section. Here you will see learning statements that give you an idea of the types of questions where a student is just as likely to answer correctly as incorrectly or in that zone of proximal development. Again, engage in a conversation with the learner around how this data relates to how they feel about their learning. When you look at these learning statements, which are you most comfortable with? Which are you least confident in understandings? Together, determine the concept and skills that they would like to focus as you're going through your next unit. From there, you can write your goal based on the content and skills identified in your upcoming unit. Based on your discussion with the student, your goal might be something like, by the end of the fractions unit, I will be able to model equivalent fractions with 90% accuracy. Then the learner can identify the steps they can take to work towards that goal, and the teacher can identify how they can support the learner. Think about what might get in the way of reaching that goal and what can be done to overcome those barriers. Throughout the unit, formative assessments and checks can track progress. As your learners are working on their goals, be sure to use your formative assessment strategies to check for understanding and correct course if needed along the way. As Mark Twain said, the secret of getting ahead is getting started. Secret of getting started is breaking your complex, overwhelming tasks into small, manageable tasks and starting on the first one. Make sure to recognize and celebrate the growth and improvement that is seen. To make your goal more than a wish, have a solid plan, check progress along the way, and above all, celebrate your accomplishments.